What's up, Herdwatching folks? Well, it looks like you're going to be seeing more of me for the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm working remotely at my primary contract. We closed the dojo, so the place I teach in the evenings is closed for the next little while. And I can talk to you guys. And there's quite a bit to talk about. But right now, the topic of the moment, the coronavirus. You would think the main topic of conversation would be scientific information about the spread of the virus or diagnosis of what caused it and where it comes from and all the rest of that. But no, that is not, in fact, what the nation is going to wind up talking about, because the DNC, the Democratic Party, seized their opportunity here. They were going to get destroyed in November. Bernie Sanders, the socialist, had completely failed in his bid for the presidency. Joe Biden, his mental health is slowly deteriorating, and not in a like, I'm annoyed about the stuff Joe Biden says, haha, he's crazy way, but in a very literal, the man has dementia kind of way. We're looking at a guy who's had brain surgeries in the past, has a history of aneurysm problems, coupled with his age, it's not getting any better. So they were looking at a horrible scenario. The impeachment stuff had failed. The Russia hoax was gone. What the Democrats needed was a tragedy, and fast. We were getting ready, I think, to go into another summer of CNN and friends manufacturing police brutality as a crisis, the way they did the last time, because they really have nothing else. They need anger and panic in order to push the sort of federalized social programs they have, and as a way to scream Orange Man bad at the top of their lungs. But in walks Corona Chan, the best girl of the Democratic Party, the coronavirus, sweeping the world. And rather than be genuinely distressed, there's a level of glee and joy from the left about Corona that they're barely managing to pretend to hide. Look at CNN, look at MSNBC, look at their faces and the joy and energy they bring to anything that they can spin as a negative Trump story. And then they're upset and distressed every time they realize they have to find a way to talk negative about something positive. And they're going to be doing it all through the next 8 weeks of the crisis. And they're going to be doing it long after that. We are in for, between now and November, an endless round of hearings and more, forensic digging into every moment of every response. And I guarantee you there's going to be another impeachment hearing about the response to Corona. So just to be clear, a global pandemic that is overwhelming entire nations, somehow or another, that it is going to be a problem in the United States, is going to be laid personally at the feet of Donald Trump, not a federal government apparatus that has existed for decades, not the accumulation of decisions by all previous administrations. No, the federal government never existed and has no procedures and does nothing that isn't personally under Donald Trump's purview. So, we intake WHO testing kits. By the way, it wasn't testing kits. It's not like they dropped a whole bunch of ready-made boxes that say, insert Corona here on one side. What they sent were sample formulations that could be used to manufacture kits. And we have existing laws on the books that those things need to go through FDA approval. And it was faster to get approval with existing partial tests that had been already FDA approved. So we took the WHO and scientific guidelines at the time, and we created tests of our own and got those through the approval process, but it turns out there was a flaw. So I've actually spoken to people who believe that there were somehow or another pallets and pallets of ready, tested, and working WHO-supplied testing kits, and that the Trump administration just basically burned them on the docks. And that we all could have been tested by now, that the WHO had given enough kits for all of America to be tested. But no, those damn Trumpians, we got rid of all that and wanted to. Anyway, this is the sort of idiocy that we're seeing. And obviously the news media is working on this as hard as they possibly can, because their only hope for winning the next election is to try and tie every death, every grieving family personally to a failing of Donald Trump, so that they can then push a social agenda. And don't think that they're just going to push this election. This is their opportunity to push everything they've ever wanted. You're going to hear renewed calls for socialized medicine. You are going to hear renewed calls for universal basic income. You are going to hear renewed calls for the government takeover of critical industries. Google, if you don't think they aren't coming for you, you're out of your mind. But expect that telecommunications companies, TV, phone, that all of this stuff is going to be, people are going to advocate for putting that under government control. Because as we've seen, obviously in the wake of Corona, those nations that are the most oppressively run by governments have been doing great, right? No, of course not. They've been doing horribly. But, you know, I mean, Corona sort of brings out everything that the socialist left really desires. You know, we could look at China and see a tragedy, but they look at China and see everything they want. Here was a government that was able to unilaterally control every aspect of people's lives, unilaterally control access to the information, both internal and external. And when their poor, wretched, starving population that had been eating bats and half-rotten carcasses, which is one of the problems that started this whole thing, when those people finally got sick, it was within the power of the Chinese government to round them up and put them in hospitals that were essentially prison camps until they either died or got better, and then force them to lavish praise on the government for propaganda purposes. This is everything Bernie Sanders loves and secretly desires. This is everything Nancy Pelosi wants in her little world. Absolute power forever, justified by whatever tragedy they can get their hands on, because socialism is always justified by tragedy. It's the only reason people ever give up that amount of freedom and control, is because someone convinces them that there's a tragedy and then convinces them that giving away power is the only way to solve it. So no matter what you hear, you are going to hear a non-ending narrative from now to November about why we need to abandon capitalism, why we need to abandon everything, why all of this is purely Donald Trump's fault. And you're going to see it. Watch their eyes. Every time somebody dies, they'll basically be clapping their hands with joy. And if in their world the worst happens, and that America isn't hit too badly because of the actions of this government, you are going to see tears and anguish on the faces of CNN, the likes you have not seen since election night in 2016. This is their last best hope. This is their shot at redemption, the Rocky title fight. They can use this tragedy to bring down Donald Trump and advance a social agenda that the entire country had been rejecting for years and looked like we were going to reject again. And all they have to do is what to socialists is not a problem. Sacrifice a couple of 100,000 lives and blame it on the other guy. So, I don't know, man. Look at their eyes. Look at their faces. You're going to see what I'm talking about. And hopefully, we don't go that way. Hopefully, we realize that global pandemics are problematic and they are outside the normal order of business to begin with. And this illusion that the government was perfectly would have been perfectly prepared if somebody hadn't stepped in, that the bureaucrats and the agencies and, you know, everything was on path and there was a plan and it was all going to be perfect and we were going to all sail through this without any problem. It's just ridiculous. It would have been ridiculous. And, but that's the fantasy they're going to sell you. And hopefully my fellow Americans, as Ronald Reagan would say, you guys are smarter than that, but we'll see. This is certainly going to be the defining event of these 4 years, and we will see if the left manages to use it as the wedge that they need, or if the nation as a whole is going to be smarter than that and rise above it. Okay, guys, we will obviously talk more. Stay safe, you know, socially distance or whatever else it is you need to do, and look for more video from me.